Imagine history not as an old book, but as a mirror. Not as a dusty archive, but as a living voice that asks you today, where are you going? In a world where facts are turned into opinions, and the past is often distorted or forgotten, we do not need more data. We need more meaning. We need someone who understood that history does not merely recount what was, but reveals what is, and warns of what may come again. One of the great minds who saw history this way was Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, a scholar, a Quranic commentator, a jurist, but above all, a historian with an exceptional clarity of thought. To him, history was not a decorative aspect of scholarship. It was a moral education, a mirror of society, a call to responsibility. In this video, we explore: who was Al-Tabari? What was his message? And how can we apply his principles in our age of disorientation? Al-Tabari was born in the year 839 in Amal, in present-day Iran, into a world in transition. The great Umayyads had fallen, the Abbasid Caliphate ruled, but many conflicts, intellectual, political, and social, shaped the thinking of his era. Even as a child, Al-Tabari showed extraordinary brilliance. He memorized the Quran by the age of 7, began collecting hadiths at 9, and set out alone at 12 on a lifelong journey in search of knowledge, a spiritual hijrah that would define him. His path took him through the great centers of Islamic scholarship: Ray, Basra, Kufa, Wasit, Baghdad, Damascus, Fustat, learning from the greatest minds of his time. But he never accepted things at face value. He compared, he examined, he asked. Because Al-Tabari was not just a collector of knowledge, he was a thinker. His body of work is immense. His famous Quranic exegesis, Tafsir al-Tabari, remains one of the most comprehensive and systematic scholarly works in Islamic history. Yet his greatest legacy, in both scale and ambition, is his monumental historical work, Tarikh al-Rusul wal-Muluk, the history of prophets and kings. This work covers the history of humanity, from Adam to his own time. But Al-Tabari did not write for rulers. He wrote for the conscience of the Ummah, not to glorify the past, but to warn the future, not to entertain, but to awaken thought. He was convinced, whoever fails to understand the past will act blindly in the present, and whoever ignores the signs of history will repeat its mistakes. Al-Tabari's work is not only a mirror of history, it is a mirror of his intellectual worldview. 3 central principles are woven throughout his writings. They give his historical perspective a timeless character, one that speaks directly to the heart of our own time. Firstly, history is not a report. It is a divine test. For Al-Tabari, history was never just about recording events. It was a stage on which God's justice and human morality were revealed. He showed how power was abused and what followed, how empires rose and what made them collapse, how leadership failed when justice was abandoned, and how nations fell when they ignored the commands of Allah. But Al-Tabari did not write to condemn. He wrote to uncover meaning. He believed that history does not preach, it reflects the consequences. In today's world, where political decisions are often made without awareness of historical patterns, Al-Tabari's message is clear. Study the peoples who came before you, not to glorify them, but to avoid repeating their downfall. Secondly, truth is born through patience, not opinion. Al-Tabari was a master of careful inquiry. In his historical writings, he often presented multiple versions of a single event. He named his sources, listed transmitters, and quoted the chains of narration. He rarely offered judgments. He gave you the evidence and left you to think. In our age, dominated by quick conclusions, loud opinions, and short attention spans, His approach is revolutionary. He shows us that knowledge is not what you say first. It is what remains after long contemplation. For Al-Tabari, patience was not weakness, but the foundation of wisdom. He understood that truth needs time, time to mature, time to be tested, time to be understood. Thirdly, all history is spiritual, for it reveals divine order. To Al-Tabari, the world was not a product of random forces. History was a stream, directed by the will of Allah. Events do not happen by chance. They occur as tests, signs, and lessons. He described how God's justice is not only visible in the afterlife, but already present in this world. When tyranny brings down empires, when sincerity unites hearts, when patience triumphs over brute force. This view transforms how we perceive crisis. It does not lead to fatalism. It calls us to responsibility. It reminds us, you are part of history, and your character determines which side of it you belong to. What does Al-Tabari's thinking offer us, here and now? We live in a time when many have become disconnected from history. Some distort it. Others use it to divide. Few seek to understand it. But Al-Tabari offers an invitation, not merely to remember, but to reflect. He reminds us that history is never neutral. It reveals what happens when a society loses its sense of justice. It shows how easily greed replaces responsibility, and it teaches that you are not just a witness to history, you are one of its authors. If we consume history merely to feel informed, we miss its purpose. But if we study it to sharpen our character, to awaken moral clarity, and to realign our compass, then we walk in Al-Tabari's path. In his view, the past was not behind us. It was around us, a continuous echo that speaks to those who listen with the heart. Al-Tabari was a man of the pen, but his words strike deeper than any sword. Because they do not target enemies, they awaken conscience. He did not write to be praised. He wrote to shape generations. He did not leave behind an empire of gold, but a legacy of meaning. And this legacy still speaks to us today. Look closely, listen deeply, and write your chapter in history with responsibility. Which lesson from Al-Tabari's thought touched you most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to explore how Islamic history can light the path forward. Reason is a light that guides us. Revelation is a light that created us. But what happens when these two lights meet? What if reason and religion are not enemies, but allies? In a world filled with speculation, philosophy, and theological extremes, a man rose who demanded both clarity and faith, thought and devotion. His name was Ibn Taymiyyah. He was uncomfortable, unyielding, often imprisoned, often misunderstood. Yet behind his name lies more than a defender of Islam. In this video, we discover Ibn Taymiyyah not as a dogmatist, but as a thinker, a man who built a bridge between reason and revelation. Ibn Taymiyyah was born in 1263 in Haran, into a world in flames. The Mongols had destroyed Baghdad. The Islamic world was fractured, politically, spiritually, morally. At a young age, his family fled to Damascus. There, amid houses of learning, heated debates, and the echo of a lost golden age, a mind took shape that would soon challenge everything. He was a prodigy. He mastered Quran, Hadith, fiqh, theology, and logic. But for Ibn Taymiyyah, knowledge was not mere content. It was obligation. He wrote, taught, and challenged. He opposed blind imitation, excessive veneration of saints, speculative theology. He sought to return to the source, the Quran, the Sunnah, and clear reason. But the path was not easy. His teachings met resistance from philosophers, mystics, and rulers. He was arrested, exiled, imprisoned. Yet he continued writing, in prison cells, in isolation, and in unwavering clarity. To Ibn Taymiyyah, solitude was no punishment. It was a test, and a testament to the steadfastness of thought. Ibn Taymiyyah lived in a time where thought followed two main roads: blind obedience to tradition, or speculative philosophy divorced from belief. But he chose a third path. Not either, or, but both, in truth united. To him, reason was a gift, but not a god. He said, "Reason is the tool by which we recognize revelation, not its judge, but its servant. To deny reason is to walk in darkness, but to ignore revelation is to forget the light that created us." He argued, if authentic reason and authentic revelation appear to contradict, the fault lies in our understanding, for truth never contradicts itself. He stood against philosophers who buried God's truth in rigid systems, against theologians who distorted God's attributes to fit Greek categories. To him, God is not the product of logic, but the source of logic itself. At the same time, he opposed those who silenced reason altogether, who claimed that faith meant blind obedience, not understanding. Ibn Taymiyyah countered, "Faith is insight, not imitation. Human beings were created with reason, to examine, to reflect, to recognize." In his major work, Dar Ta'arud al-Aql wa al-Naql, the refutation of the conflict between reason and revelation, he laid out a vision. Revelation is perfect. Reason is limited, but essential. Only their harmony leads to true knowledge. He warned against two extremes: those who claim only what is provable is true, and those who say only what is handed down is valid, with no questions asked. For Ibn Taymiyyah, both positions were dangerous. He saw the middle way, a faith that uses the mind, a reason that does not replace God, but seeks Him. He wrote, "The light of reason and the light of revelation shine together. Whoever extinguishes one walks in shadow." And that line remains as the legacy of a man who thought to believe and believed to think. Ibn Taymiyyah lived in the 13th century, yet his thought carries a light that shines brighter than ever today. We live in a time where the front lines are drawn again, between science and faith, between emotion and logic, between tradition and modernity. But what can we learn from a scholar who built bridges where others built walls? Firstly, reason is a tool, not a judge over truth. Ibn Taymiyyah reminded us, reason is a light, but only when it does not set itself above the source of all light. In a world dominated by opinions and noise, he taught, reason must be guided, not by emotion or power, but by revelation. Reason without revelation is directionless. Revelation without reason is lifeless. Today, we need the courage to think deeply again, not in opposition to faith, but in its light. Secondly, faith demands understanding, not blind imitation. Faith, to Ibn Taymiyyah, was never a mechanical act. He said, "Those who simply repeat what they hear, without reflection, betray the depth of faith." Knowledge begins with questions, and faith becomes stronger, not weaker, when it is examined. And more than that, those who know carry responsibility. Knowledge is not a decoration, it is service. A scholar who remains silent when he should speak has failed. This principle is often lost today. We know, but we do not act. Ibn Taymiyyah reminds us, knowledge without courage is escape. Truth without commitment is hollow. Thirdly, the middle path is strength. Extremism is weakness. Whether in theology, politics, or everyday life, he warned against oversimplifiers, the loud, the divisive. But truth often lives in balance, between obedience and understanding. between freedom and discipline, between silence and speech. For him, the middle path was not a compromise, but a conscious choice, a path of clarity, patience, moral depth. In a time of polarization and shallow slogans, this principle is more relevant than ever. Balance is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. These three principles, reason as a tool, faith as conscious understanding, and balance as moral strength, are more than ancient insights. They are signposts for a time that is searching for orientation, for people who want to believe without closing off, and want to think without getting lost. Ibn Taymiyyah shows us truth is not a choice between opposites. It lives where reason and revelation meet, not in the noise of extremes, but in the stillness of balance. Ibn Taymiyyah was a thinker in a storm. Surrounded by power struggles, ideological extremes, and theological confusion, he held fast to a simple principle: truth is clear, when sought with an open heart and a vigilant mind. He was no philosopher in an ivory tower, no preacher of convenience. He was a man who fought with words for the purity of thought and the clarity of faith. Today, in an age of information overload, intellectual confusion, and spiritual disorientation, we need his voice again, not as a dogma, but as an invitation. What does the harmony of reason and faith mean to you? Share it in the comments. And if you seek wisdom, thought, and spiritual insight, subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes, the path to renewal does not begin in argument, but in understanding. What if true knowledge doesn't lie in simple answers, but in the ability to ask questions with reason? The dust of Cordoba lies golden on the stones. In the distance, a muezzin calls to prayer as the shadows of the palm trees slowly shift. Beneath the white arches of an Andalusian hall sits a man who does not write, but listens. He does not ask, but understands. He wears no crown, no sword, no seal, but the weight on his shoulders is heavier than all three, for he carries the trust of the people and the burden of truth. His name is Ibn Rushd, and this video is not a monument to his scholarship. It is a call to clarity, to integrity, to truth in times of confusion. Ibn Rushd was born in 1126 in Cordoba, a city that, at the time, was one of the brightest centers of learning in the world. He came from a lineage of judges and scholars. His grandfather had served as a qadi, a religious judge. From an early age, Ibn Rushd showed extraordinary devotion to learning. He studied fiqh, hadith, medicine, logic, mathematics, and theology. But he was not a scholar lost in books. He was a servant of truth, driven not only to understand it, but to bring it into the world. As an adult, he became a judge, and later the chief qadi of Cordoba. His rulings were known for their wisdom, their fairness, and their incorruptibility. He did not speak for praise. He spoke for order, and he understood. Justice does not begin with laws. It begins with a clear heart. When political tides shifted, he fell out of favor. But even in exile, his gaze remained clear, his voice calm. Because Ibn Rushd was never bound to titles. He was bound to what remains, the duty to truth. Ibn Rushd left behind many books, but his greatest teaching was his way of being, the way he thought, the way he spoke, the way he judged. He lived in a time of uncertainty, but he did not search for security and power. He searched for it in clarity. His life shows us, truth is not what grows loud. It is what stays still and still endures. Firstly, Knowledge demands responsibility. Ibn Rushd believed, knowledge is not decoration. It is a trust. Whoever understands must serve. Whoever knows must be honest. As a judge and a teacher, he took care that every word he spoke could stand, before Allah, before the people, and before his own conscience. He taught, a ruling must not depend on mood, not on benefit, only on what is just. And if you know that, then you must speak it, even when it is difficult. Secondly, truth demands courage, even if it leaves you alone. There were times when Ibn Rushd was honored for his clarity, and times when that same clarity brought him trouble. But he did not change. He did not bend. He remained. Even when he was exiled by political enemies, his dignity remained unshaken. He did not complain. He did not cling to his rank, because his honor was not tied to power, but to loyalty to the truth. His life reminds us, truth has a cost, but lies come with a debt, and those who wish to stay pure must be willing to stand still, even when others walk away. Thirdly, clarity begins within. Ibn Rushd was not a man of grand gestures, but everything about him was ordered. His speech, his thinking, his way of walking. He believed, if you want clarity on the outside, it must begin on the inside. He spoke slowly, he judged carefully, and he was always aware. Every moment is a test, not only in the courtroom, but in daily life, in conversation, in silence. For him, clarity was not a technique. It was the mirror of the soul. And only those who keep that mirror clean can walk upright, even in unstable times. Ibn Rushd did not teach through volume. He taught through measure, not through power, but through presence. His life is a quiet call to us all. Do not seek influence first. Seek sincerity, because the first fades, but the second endures. We live in a time full of voices, yet often lacking the silence in which truth becomes audible. We are good at collecting information, but we lose the order that gives it meaning. We speak often about justice, but fear the responsibility it demands. Ibn Rushd lived in a different era, but his poise, his clarity, and his quiet strength still speak. To anyone who wishes to live with integrity, firstly, speak only when you know, and act only when you have tested yourself. In a world full of opinions, Ibn Rushd reminds us of something simple. Knowledge is nothing without maturity. He spoke only when he was certain that his ruling rested on justice, not on assumption. And he acted only after examining his own intention in the light of his conscience. Today, where so much is loud and fast, this posture is more needed than ever. Pause before judging. Ask yourself, do I serve the truth or just my feeling? Because every word has weight and every step has direction. Secondly, your dignity does not depend on whether others validate you. Ibn Rushd was honored and later rejected, but neither raised nor lowered him, because his dignity was not tied to people. It rested with Allah and with the clarity of his heart. Even today, many discover that integrity is not always rewarded, that honesty can isolate. But Ibn Rushd teaches us, it is better to stand alone in truth than to be celebrated in falsehood. True dignity does not need a stage. It shows itself when you do not fall, even when others let you fall. Thirdly, clarity does not come through arguments, but through sincerity. We live in a time where many wish to persuade, but few convince through the lives they lead. Ibn Rushd impressed not through rhetoric, but through consistency. His clarity came not from a desire to please, but from loyalty to inner order. He was not perfect, but he was principled. And today, where so much is unclear and reactive, one thing becomes clear. We need people whose words arise from sincerity, whose yes means yes, and whose no is shaped by conscience, not mood. Because only where clarity lives can trust grow. Ibn Rushd teaches us, you do not need to be a judge to live with justice. You do not need a title to live with truth. And you do not need applause to walk upright. Clarity begins where you no longer need to impress. Where you ask, does this action serve what is good or just myself? And where you are willing to remain in silence. If silence is purer than any word. Ibn Rushd was not a man of noise. He did not seek headlines, applause, or power. And yet his voice still echoes. Not because it was loud, but because it remained clear. He lived in uncertain times, in a land of scholars, among pressures and expectations. But his compass was not what others said. It was what he recognized as true. In the light of his faith, he shows us, truth does not need a stage. Sincerity does not need witnesses. And integrity is born not in words, but in loyalty to what one knows is right. In a world that often wavers between noise and opinion, between haste and performance, Ibn Rushd offers a quiet but powerful reminder. Seek knowledge, but flee from pride. Speak with measure, and be silent with clarity. Do not first judge others. Ask whether you still follow yourself. What does inner clarity mean to you? And where in your life do you feel truth begin in stillness? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to learn more about wisdom, integrity, and spiritual depth in Islam, subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes, the path to Allah does not begin with an answer, but with the honesty of a question. What if true knowledge doesn't lie in distraction, but in focus? And how can you avoid the temptations of life? Imam Malik ibn Anas, a man of knowledge who established the principles of Islamic law in the city of Medina. But Imam Malik was not only a scholar. He was a man of principles, someone who always remained focused on what truly matters. His teachings went beyond legal rulings and reached into the heart of what it means to live a life of integrity, discipline, and wisdom. In one of his most famous stories, we see how an elephant standing outside his classroom tested his students. How easily do people get distracted, and how much inner focus is needed to concentrate on what truly matters: knowledge and spiritual clarity. Imam Malik ibn Anas was the founder of the Maliki school of law, one of the 4 major Sunni legal schools. Born in Medina, the holy city of the Prophet Muhammad, Imam Malik was raised in a family deeply committed to learning and faith. He spent his life studying the hadiths of the Prophet and imparting knowledge to those eager to learn. Imam Malik was known for his humility, independence, and his strict adherence to the traditions of the Prophet. His wisdom extended beyond legal texts, as he encouraged his followers to remain focused on what truly matters in life. One of his most famous stories exemplifies this focus and dedication to knowledge. The story of Imam Malik and the elephant takes place in Medina during the reign of the Abbasid Caliph. The Caliph sent a magnificent elephant as a gift to the city. The enormous animal caused quite a stir, attracting everyone's attention. During one of his lessons, Imam Malik and his students were deeply engaged in the study of religious knowledge. But outside the door, the sound of excitement from people gathered around the elephant could be heard. Every student, except one, rushed outside to see the creature. Only one student remained, focused on the teachings of Imam Malik. Imam Malik noticed the student's composure and asked him, "Why didn't you go to see the elephant like everyone else?" The student replied without hesitation, I have directed my focus to the beneficial knowledge you are teaching me, and I do not wish to be distracted by something that is of no lasting value." Imam Malik was deeply impressed by the student's answer. This student, unlike the others, understood that true value does not lie in external distractions, but in knowledge and spiritual growth. This student was the only one who remained focused on the essential, and in the years that followed, he became one of Imam Malik's closest disciples and helpers in spreading his teachings. Imam Malik's story with the elephant teaches us more than just the importance of maintaining focus in a world full of distractions. It challenges us to ask ourselves how we use our time and energy. In today's world, where we are constantly bombarded by external stimuli, focusing on what truly matters is more crucial than ever. What can we learn from this story and apply to our daily lives? Here are 3 key lessons. Firstly, true knowledge comes through focus. Imam Malik and the student who remained behind teach us that true knowledge is gained when we focus and eliminate distractions. Today, in a world filled with distractions from social media, news, and external pressures, it is more important than ever to focus on what truly enriches us, knowledge that leads to genuine wisdom. If we lose ourselves in the noise of the world, we lose access to the true sources of knowledge. Secondly, self-discipline and inner strength are key. The student who stayed behind demonstrated profound self-discipline. He could resist not only the temptation of the elephant, but also the social pressures around him. In a world full of distractions, this story shows us that self-discipline is not just the ability to say no, but the ability to recognize what really matters. True strength comes when we stay true to ourselves and do not let external distractions lead us astray. Thirdly, the importance of setting the right priorities. Imam Malik teaches us that the right priority in life is not found in material gains or fleeting pleasures, but in the pursuit of true knowledge and spiritual growth. The student who did not rush to see the elephant understood that the true goal in life lies not in temporary moments of entertainment or awe, but in long-term learning and growth. When we learn to set the right priorities, we spend our time on the things that truly enrich us. The story of Imam Malik and the elephant reminds us that true wisdom is not found in distraction or superficial pleasures, but in inner focus and the discipline to concentrate on what truly matters. In a world full of distractions that constantly pull us in different directions, Imam Malik teaches us that true strength lies in maintaining control over our attention and directing our energy toward what truly moves us forward, whether it be knowledge, spiritual insight, or inner growth. The path to true knowledge requires patience, self-discipline, and the ability to question our preferences and distractions. Imam Malik ibn Anas teaches us in this story a valuable lesson. True greatness does not come from outward glamour or material gifts, but from focus and the ability to concentrate on what is important. In a world that constantly bombards us with information and external stimuli, we must learn to set the right priorities and keep our inner focus. The student, who refrained from going to see the elephant, understood that the true value lies not in the outer distractions, but in connecting with inner knowledge and inner truth. Imam Malik shows us that true discipline and integrity is in the ability to avoid being led astray by the world's distractions. If we follow these principles, we can not only acquire knowledge, but also find our inner freedom. What does it mean to stay focused in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want to learn more about Imam Malik and his wisdom, subscribe to our channel. Imagine if history wasn't random, but part of a plan that ends with you. In the beginning, there was darkness. Then came the Word, and it brought light. In a work that begins with the creation of the world and ends with the coming of the final day, one man tried to grasp the impossible, the entire history of mankind, through the lens of faith. His name, Ibn Kathir. His work, Al-Bidayah wan-Nihaya, the beginning and the end. In an age where myths and opinions competed for dominance, Ibn Kathir believed, truth does not begin with man, it begins with Allah. This video is not a journey through dates and events. It is a journey through a worldview that does not see history as coincidence, but as part of divine intention. We look into the work of a man who was not just a historian, but a guardian of revelation. What can we learn today from someone who sought to illuminate both the past and the future through the light of truth? Ismail ibn Umar ibn Kathir was born in 1301 in Syria, during a time of political unrest and theological debate. He grew up in Busra, later moving to Damascus, then a flourishing center of Islamic scholarship. Early on, his thirst for knowledge became apparent. He studied under prominent scholars, most notably Ibn Taymiyyah, whose teachings profoundly shaped his thought. Particularly Ibn Taymiyyah's emphasis on returning to revelation and rejecting unfounded speculation became the foundation of Ibn Kathir's approach. But Ibn Kathir was no mere follower. He combined the methodology of his teachers with a broad historical perspective. As a Quranic exegete, mufassir, hadith scholar, muhadith, and historian, he constantly sought to connect authentic sources with the unfolding of human history. His Tafsir Ibn Kathir became a standard in Quranic commentary, but his greatest legacy lies in one monumental work that encompasses everything, Al-Bidayah wan-Nihaya, the beginning and the end. What is history? To many, it's a sequence of dates, names, and wars. To Ibn Kathir, it was a revealed current, flowing from one source, Allah, unfolding through time, directed, tested, purposeful. In his work, Al-Bidayah wan-Nihaya, he doesn't offer history through the eyes of the victors. He writes from the standpoint of truth, as it is revealed, not as men narrate it, but as Allah wills it. Three core principles run through every page of this monumental work. Firstly, history begins with creation, not with mankind. Ibn Kathir does not begin with a king, a tribe, or a civilization, but with the creation of the heavens and the earth. His chronicle starts where belief starts, with Allah, with Adam, with what no eye saw, except through the light of revelation. He writes about the angels, the creation of light and darkness, the fall of Iblis, and the beginning of human life. And he doesn't speculate. He builds upon the Quran, the Sunnah, and trustworthy narrations. For him, history is inseparable from divine will. That's why it begins not with man, but with the divine command, be, and it is. Secondly, transmission is not neutral. Not all narrations are equal. Ibn Kathir was not a mere collector of tales. He was an evaluator, a distinguisher, a guardian. In his work, he clearly distinguishes between authentic reports, weak narrations, and outright fabrications. If he mentions a questionable account, he always includes a remark, and Allah knows best. Or, this narration is weak, its chain interrupted. He was a scholar with a sense of accountability. He knew, whoever transmits history shapes the thinking of the Ummah. So he applied the principles of hadith science, analyzing chains, evaluating narrators, separating truth from myth. In an age where fiction easily became accepted truth, Ibn Kathir stood as a barrier against distortion. Thirdly, history does not end in the present. It leads to the hereafter. One of the most striking features of Al-Bidayah wan-Nihaya is its final chapters. Ibn Kathir doesn't stop at the events of his own time. He continues, writing about the signs of the hour, the day of judgment, the afterlife, paradise, and hellfire. For him, the end of history is not political. It is cosmic. History doesn't end with a caliph, but with the divine reckoning. He describes in awe what the Sunnah reports: the return of Isa, the emergence of the Dajjal, the great reckoning, the weighing of deeds. Thus, history becomes for him a path to awakening. Whoever understands the past sees the present clearly, and whoever remembers the last day lives with purpose and acts with responsibility. Al-Bidayah wan-Nihaya is more than a book of history. It is a reflection of divine order, a call to approach the past not with nostalgia, but with understanding, a call to face the future not with fear, but with preparation, and a call to live the present not in heedlessness, but in awareness. In a time when history is often used to shape ideologies or manipulate emotions, Ibn Kathir reminds us of a different approach: not to control, but to clarify; not to entertain, but to awaken. His work is a compass in the storm of modern noise, speculation, and selective memory. What can we, in the digital age, in an era of information overflow and historical amnesia, learn from his method and mindset? Firstly, history needs honesty, not hero worship. Ibn Kathir did not write to impress. He wrote to preserve, to order, to protect the truth. He never glorified blindly. Even when writing about great figures, he remains balanced, mentioning both virtues and flaws. In an age hungry for heroes and simplified narratives, he teaches, integrity is more valuable than admiration, because only through honesty can we act justly in the present. This attitude is urgently needed today, in families, in education, in media, and in religious discourse. Not the most exciting story matters, but the most truthful one. Secondly, transmission is a trust. Knowledge is not a toy. In a world where people casually repost quotes, spread hadiths without verifying them, and tell history in seconds, Ibn Kathir reminds us, knowledge is an amana, a trust. It must be handled with care. It must be verified. It must be treated with humility. He shows us, it is no weakness to say, Allah knows best. It is strength, a form of reverence, a form of honesty. In a world full of noise, he calls us back to quiet reflection, to caution, to listening before speaking, to reading before judging. Thirdly, history is not a rearview mirror. It's a bridge to eternity. Perhaps the most profound insight in Al-Bidayah wan-Nihaya is its horizon. For Ibn Kathir, history doesn't end in the world. It ends when truth becomes fully visible, on the day of resurrection. He reminds us, the real story of every soul does not end with death. It begins there. This perspective heals. It puts our worries in context. It calls us to focus on what matters: deeds, intentions, sincerity. In a world obsessed with the now, Ibn Kathir brings us back to the eternal. Ibn Kathir's work is like a lantern in the dark, a reminder that history is not just a record we read, but a mirror we look into. He left us no ready-made opinions, but a clear framework: Quran, Sunnah, integrity, responsibility. And perhaps true education begins where we stop telling ourselves what we want to hear and start asking what Allah wants us to understand. History has many faces, but only one truth. Ibn Kathir did not seek the loudest voice. He sought the most reliable source. He believed those who treat the past with reverence can face the future with clarity. In a time where history is weaponized, to divide, to validate, to control, his legacy reminds us. In Islam, history is more than memory. It is a form of worship, a bridge between what was and what is yet to come. Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya is not a museum. It is a path, a road that teaches us to question, to examine, to trust, and to live in a way that makes our own ending a good one. Because in the end, it's not about names and dates. It's about what we do with them. What does history mean to you in the light of faith? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper into the teachings of great scholars, subscribe to our channel. Because those who remember the beginning do not forget what the end was made for. May Allah make us among those who learn with reverence and live with sincerity.